District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program.
The world moves fast. Your workday? Even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn and I hire wrong. So our orders get all backed up. We're drowning in paperwork, then actually drowning, careless fighting off sharks with a stapler, and pirates are pillaging the office copier, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant goes beyond the resume, using unique insights to deliver a smarter shortlist. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. All right, dear listeners, we're in for a special treat. You might be seeing her social media videos all across X, Instagram, and Facebook. If you don't already know Lucy Biggers, you ought to know her. She is the head of social media at the Free Press, which is one of my favorite websites to read. They do a lot of impartial reporting on a multitude of topics, including subjects we're going to touch upon with Lucy today: climate realism, kind of this moving away from net zero, energy realism, and the like. And Lucy has such a fascinating story, and I'm so grateful for her to come on and discuss kind of her journey in this. So Lucy, thank you so much for coming on and share with my listeners, what's your journey? You were previously an AOC supporter, you worked for Now This, and you've kind of backtracked on that and now call yourself a climate realist. So walk us through your journey in media, please.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. I've been in the media now I graduated from college in 2012. I started at Now This in 2015, and I was there till 2021. And while I was there, those were my climate activist days. So I was very on the left. I built up a social media following, talking about climate issues and covering things like the Green New Deal. I interviewed Greta Thunberg, very lovingly interviewed her, I should say. Like, it wasn't exactly like a critical interview, but, I amplified her work. AOC, really anyone you could think of that was pushing the generic climate narrative. I was advocating for that during those years. And then I left in 2021. I had a short stint at a nonprofit for a year and then found my way to the Free Press. And obviously, if you know the ideology of the Free Press versus Now This, during that time of kind of leaving the Now This, going to a nonprofit, I started to sort of become more nuanced and more centered and leave some of the more extreme ideology behind, just from the process of like growing up, having my kids, living through COVID. Those things all played a part in me leaving the more extreme climate stuff and finding my way to Free Press. And I took on a role as head of social media 3 years ago and just thought kind of, all right, I had this sort of climate influencer past. I'm never going to do that again. But like, that was in my past. I'm just going to help build the Free Press. But then this year I have 2 kids now and my younger son turned 1, and I kind of looked around and I'm like, all right, we've all had those moments where you're like, what do I really want to do in my life? What do I want to accomplish? Like, what did I come here to do? And I kept coming back to this climate thing. And I was like, there's a lot of issues. The mainstream narrative around climate change is really wrong. And if I don't speak up, like, who is going to speak up? And because I think like the net zero stuff is so damaging, the climate anxiety is a huge motivator for me. And so I just started posting on my social media again this past May. And it's been a really great learning experience for me of just getting back into this space, but on the other side, and doing climate realism.
Was there a particular turning point, like a particular event? You said that you were gradually kind of waking up or shedding your past skin with climate alarmism, but was there a particular moment that you would say changed your perspective?
I know I get that question a lot, and I always feel like my answer is more complex, and it's more just not that there was one moment. It was like death by 1,000 cuts, to quote Taylor Swift. it was a lot of questioning over time. And also, even when I was in the climate movement, I would question even what I was saying. And I almost felt like I had two personalities, where I had an outward facing personality that pushed the climate narrative. And then I had a lot of internal questions, to the point where in 2020, I read Michael Schellenberger's book, Apocalypse Never, when it came out. And I was still at my old job hosting a climate series, but I felt I was questioning enough that I wanted to seek that out, because the doomsday scenario of climate and the nihilism was really weighing me down. And so I think I kind of sought that out for my own mental health, of like what else is out there and the questioning. But I think I don't have like one moment. It was a lot of questioning, but I was so entrenched in the group think of the climate movement, of being very far on the left, that switch of sort of saying I'm no longer a climate activist took a long time to kind of get out of. Almost had to do a little bit of a deprogramming.
And as we're speaking, we are witnessing kind of this global retreat from climate alarmism. We saw the headlines last year from New York Times in September saying it's not just the US, it's the whole world that's retreating. This past week, Axios said climate investments are down, things are cooling down. And you released a video today as we're speaking, kind of debunking this 97%. This is a statistic that if you challenge this, I have challenged this, and I haven't really gotten too much pushback, but it will attract a lot of haters on social media and people who will say you deserve to be, sent off to faraway places for daring to challenge this. But the 97%, consensus that all scientists agree that climate change is anthropogenic and catastrophic. Mm-hmm. But I remember hearing about this with a group that I work with called the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow. Early in my work with them, I've been a contractor with them, hosting this podcast and also a video series with them and assisting them. And they taught me early on that statistic, the survey is kind of convoluted and not honestly portrayed, where it wasn't sent to every single climate scientist. And maybe they got feedback from 100 some odd people. And of those 100 some odd respondents, 97% of them responded in the affirmative. So walk my listeners through that video you made and some of the stuff like that you debunked.
Yeah, I'm caught up on that one because I just made the video about it. And it was because someone had commented and been like, wow, why would I listen to a random girl on TikTok when 99% of scientists agree, right? So I was like, okay, I knew the study was wrong. It's this Cook et al. From 2013 study. And I think they looked at 12. So what they did was they looked at 12,000 papers, and the papers have summaries of what it's about. And the people who looked at it were biased of themselves because they were trying to find a consensus. So they already were going in with a bias because they were like, let's really just make a consensus for this so that we have this stat. So that was why this study even came to be. So it was already biased from the start. And then they actually didn't poll people. They just looked at the studies themselves. So anything that touched on climate at all, they would read it. And if you even said CO2 is a greenhouse gas as part of your study, even if it wasn't talking about climate change or human-caused climate change, that would be counted as part of the consensus because you're saying that we have some impact on the climate. But urban heat island effect, where we build big cities, has an effect on the climate. Like obviously we have an effect because we exist on the climate, right? And so it had a very shallow consensus is the way that critics describe it, where to get categorized as part of that 97%, you didn't have to say climate change was dangerous, that we're all going to die, that we could reverse it, that CO2 is killing us. You just had to say the climate, we have an impact as humans. And so they really lumped in way more people than it should have been. Even people who maybe said we're going to have a minor impact, or it's not dangerous, would be in that 97%. And so it got run with. And actually President Obama, which I think is so interesting because he's not really thought about in the mainstream as someone who would spread a fake news, but he tweeted in 2013, May of 2013, 97% of climate scientists agree. Climate change is happening. It's dangerous and we're causing it and it's man-made. And again, the paper never said it was dangerous or man-made. It just said that there's a consensus that climate change is happening. And and then Obama went further. And so that is what kind of spread around and became this sort of mainstream idea that just won't die, right? It's just the meme in our head. And I talk a lot about this in my work. It's the common knowledge or the subconsciously held beliefs around the state of the planet and what climate change really is are so wrong. And so young people just think that the planet is burning. And if you don't believe that, you're a climate change denier or whatever it is. And so all of my work is trying to chip away at these sort of falsely held beliefs that are unexamined and be like, okay, what is the reality? And luckily for us, the reality is a really positive story because the planet's actually in a good place, and humans in general, how prosperous we are and developed we are, we're in a good place.
That's why I think the net zero narrative is really crumbling, because as people see that you have to choose between fighting climate change, so to speak, or economic prosperity, people will ultimately choose economic prosperity,
right.
Or they don't have to have a false choice under something like abundance. I want to hear your thoughts on abundance. Is that like a substitute or a replacement to net zero? I know I believe that a lot of people are inclining to it as a philosophy, as something to kind of gravitate to. Realism, people talk about that, but net zero is on the outs. It seems like abundance is kind of emerging because it also says that environmental philosophy can recognize and acknowledge and embrace human progress, because as you mentioned, we can positively impact the environment. We've been responsible for restoring a lot of forests. Like, we have more forests now, even
than we did
lumber.
Like our grandparents' era.
Yes.
Yeah. Because we all have phones. We're not printing out stuff for homework, I think, I don't know. The abundance thing to me is kind of like a shtick. Like, I'm not like the abundance bros. Like, I haven't read that book by Ezra Klein that came out, but I know the thrust of it. And so I think I think the climate on the left is no longer chic, right? It's like, it was definitely like the popular thing, sort of how we saw like being pro-Palestine was. So it was the thing that everybody was talking about. It's definitely calmed down, but unfortunately what's left is all these really bad policies, like the net zero policies. And so I'm more of a libertarian type leaning person, where I think it's free markets and capitalism that create prosperity. And I did another video recently about how 95% of deaths from natural disasters have gone down 95% in the last 100 years. That's not because of climate policies. It's actually in spite of climate policies. It's because of prosperity and capitalism, and how much that this explosion of wealth, and the foundation of that has been this reliable, affordable, cheap energy, which is fossil fuels or hydrocarbons, oil, gas, coal. And they still make up 80% of our energy mix. And this idea that we're going to move away from those when they're the thing that made this conversation possible, that we have even the time to talk, because we're not out there, collecting wood and milling grain to live. And so I think I am more in the camp of, a cheap, reliable energy that works really well, and being realistic and moving away from ideology. Like, and when you say abundance, like, I almost hear inflation. I'm like, okay, abundance, what does that mean? Is that more government spending? Like, what is that? To me, if I support abundance, but it's sort of like, let the people create the situation in which individuals then can create abundance and prosperity and get the government's meddling out of there.
I agree with that. No, and I don't agree with and adhere to the lefty version of it. I think the conservative version is what you say. It's kind of this conservatarian vision where you unleash the free markets, you don't pick winners and losers. And we have seen a lot of unraveling of that, which I'm very pleased about at the federal level. And maybe we'll start to see that at the states. But on this token, something you've really highlighted and can speak to is this growing so-called climate anxiety among younger people. And I don't necessarily see this because I think we're about the same age. I graduated college in 2012 too, but a year early. And I'm a mid-level millennial. I guess we're middle-aged millennials now. And I think it's like Gen Z, Gen Alpha, the younger generation coming up, because I think our generation is growing up and changing their perspective on these issues too. But these younger kids are so anxious because, like you said, they think the world is burning, but also biodiversity is a lot better too. Like I focus on hunting and fishing. We have seen a restoration of different species that were not there during the early 20th century, largely because of people who hunt and fish. We've seen endangered species, threatened species come back because of zoos and other private conservation efforts. So even on the biodiversity front, like, we are actually getting a little bit better there too. And the world is not burning, as you said, as much.
It's only crazy. I said this too in another video that I recently did, where it's like the truth is the opposite of the narrative, where it's not just like, oh, biodiversity is stable. It's like at record levels, right? Or like, it's not just like that heat isn't dangerous. It's that 10x more people die from cold than from heat. And so it's just always, when you actually look at it, it's such a positive story. And unfortunately, like, the mainstream narrative has not picked up on it.
But speak to climate anxiety and what you think the best antidote is, because your videos are coming across saying, like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. We can mock those who are like zealously about climate anxiety. But do you think that there is an antidote? Like, what can the right or what can like climate realists do to really tamper the fears of climate anxiety among the younger set?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that with my work. I think you probably saw the video I did in the fall where I went and talked to climate people at a climate march where I was face to face with activists. And I want to do that a lot more this coming year. And I think it's just presenting people with the cold, hard facts and lovingly and realizing that, they are themselves victims of this information system that pushes fear. And, some people I feel like on the right, they'll be like, well, climate anxiety, like what a joke. But the thing about it is real for them. And so even if the facts underneath it aren't real, these young people really are walking around with anxiety for their future. I mean, I used to have that in my 20s. Like I truly was like, do I have kids? Like, do I have a future? And I had a lot of internal noise and intrusive thoughts about my lack of future and the idea that, I was walking around this beautiful, abundant planet, so afraid. And the only thing that now has changed is the information that I have in my mindset versus when I was in the climate anxiety, I was looking at the exact same set of results, set data sets of the world. And I was seeing a planet on fire because my facts were just so wrong, which is so crazy to think about. So I think we need to break through, and some kids will be responsive to it because they're not really bought into the narrative. They're just sort of passive to the narrative. And I think those are the reachable ones where you can really heal them. And then there's the more true believers who they maybe are working at a nonprofit or they're an activist or they're anti-fracking and they're socialists. And so they're more difficult to reach because they have a social cost of going against it. But I think we can make a lot of inroads with the everyday person who's just the normie.
Absolutely. And I think we can, even in the wake of, let's say, the Trump administration pulling out of different UN entities involving climate, global entities. What has been the reaction from some of your former fellow travelers in that kind of climate alarmist space? I mean, they always overreact and doom and gloom, but I think we can be effective, and we were outside of the Paris Climate Accords because, first off, that was never ratified, and two, it put stipulations on us that we were going to be redistributing resources to countries that can't keep up with emission standards. And I think going solely off of emissions is not a great way to measure environmental progress. It's a very obscure kind of thinking now.
Makes no sense.
Because you can buy carbon offsets. You can kind of fraudulently pretend that you're fighting climate change or staving off carbon emissions when in fact you're not. A lot of companies have been caught in the act with ESG credits, carbon credits, doing that. So what is kind of your take on Trump withdrawing from these compacts?
Yeah, I think it's good because I do think a few years ago I would have been so scandalized, of course, but I think ultimately it's just realpolitik, right? It is just the truth that these are wasting money. They're so biased. They're setting out and their funding requires to find a certain outcome. These IPCC reports, there's some good science in there, and I will even reference them because it's funny, even though they're so biased, they can't even find the catastrophe in the data. But ultimately, it's misleading the public. It's, I don't know, it's supporting all these really ideological scientists. So I have no problem with it, but I do understand the knee-jerk reaction of how could we? But weirdly, he did it at a time where there was such a crazy news cycle that nobody even blinked, which I like. I actually was let this just kind of go without people paying attention because their freak out about it is such a waste of hot air because ultimately it is for the best, but trying to get through to people to explain why it's not that big of a deal is so exhausting. And yeah, we need to just come back to reliable energy, and US energy independence and all of this stuff.
I want to ask you before we finish our talk, because it's very riveting and very interesting. And you being a mother and a wife, I wanted your perspective on this. Women seem to be the most stubborn, in my opinion, whether it's polling or kind of attitudinally, especially in blue states. They see that electricity prices are going up because of bad state decisions in their blue states. But they don't assign that blame to, let's say, the left or these climate mandates. How do we break through to those women? Because they want affordability, but they support policies, especially on the energy and climate front, that don't deliver on it. They deliver much higher costs.
Yeah, if that's the big question. And I think that's a big reason why I started to make content, because I think there was a lack of someone from my demographic of a younger woman younger. Well, we're getting middle-aged, but I think I can communicate with the younger people more than the people who are pushing this. And so that's a big part of the content that I'm trying to create, is connecting those dots for people and making them understand. Because I mean, I live in Connecticut. It's a very blue state, and like the politics here, it's like kind of blue no matter who, and like across the board. And we're not as bad as, you know, New York and California, but we're very close. We actually have the highest electricity bills after Hawaii and California and Connecticut. And so I look at it and I'm like, we're really sleepwalking towards really bad things. But if you're a little bit higher, if you're higher income, you're kind of insulated from that. And then you have lower working class people who are on fixed incomes, and they're the ones hit first. And so it becomes sort of a luxury belief to believe in these climate policies. But it's like, do we want to learn the hard way or the easy way, right? Like, do we have to get to a point where, like, you're kind of seeing in California with their budget issues, and in Minnesota with the fraud, and it's like really got bad, and now maybe people are going to notice, maybe not. But yeah, I think about Connecticut too, and like the politics here, and just bringing back a coalition of common sense. But I think there's so much Trump derangement syndrome that people are just sort of a one issue voter where it's hate, I hate Trump. And so they just do anything that he is opposite. And so unfortunately, it's kind of given a pass to these other policies that are not working because no one's looking at them.
Until it really hits them, because your state has a lot of challenges, although your governor, I think, is more receptive to nuclear and natural gas, which was very interesting to see. So maybe some of those blue state governors will wake up once they realize it's going to be eating a lot of people's budgets. And you can't blame the federal government, because there's a law, and something you should maybe make a video on is states actually have like exclusive power under the Federal Power Act to dictate like what type of laws they adopt, how to stack their grid. So they hold a lot of the blame, unfortunately, on these policies. Yeah, so check that out when you get some time. And I think that would make a great video. Lucy, as we round out this conversation, is there anything that you want to highlight that we did not discuss? And how can people connect with you and watch your videos?
Yeah, find my videos, share them. I love the supportive community I found on X. Someone asked me, they're like, are you in an echo chamber? And I was like, I think I am in an echo chamber on X, but I really like it because it makes me feel like heard and validated. So then when I go to other platforms like Instagram or TikTok, and maybe people aren't getting it as much and they're more aggressive and combative, I like go back to my X community and I'm like, oh, like these people, because again, there's so many realists out there. This is like I need to say this, is that like, I am just the messenger. The amount of scientists who have spent decades putting out this, sounding the alarm that climate change is not the end of humanity. We should be moving away from climate alarmism. Decades of work these people have put in. They've lost their jobs. They've been deplatformed. They've been ostracized. And only now there's been a cultural shift post-Trump and a few other reasons why. And I'm able to now come out and say this, and I'm like running. They walk so I can run kind of thing. So shout out to all the people who support my work and have done this work before me. And then, find me on Instagram, X. I'm LL Biggers on X, and I'm Lucy Biggers on everything else. And then the free press is the fp.com, and I run the social media there. So those Instagrams and stuff, I'm always like the man behind the curtain.
I'll put all those in the show notes, as I like to do with every single guest. Lucy, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. I hope we can revisit with future conversations. And I think we can find some ways to collaborate. I will definitely ping you on some interesting stuff that I'm working on. And thank you so much for coming on. And I hope more people, especially my listeners, gravitate to your content, watch it, share it, because you make really compelling stuff. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you. I hope we could do this again.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played. And also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day. And please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.